Hey, here we go. Oh, smooth turn down. I like it. How are you doing?
I am well, my friend. How are you?
So grateful. Grateful. I know we've been talking a lot about changing logistics, moving pieces, and we talked a little bit about it last week. I feel like, okay, now I finally feel almost normal. Like I can wrap my mind around things a little bit. So I'm grateful.
Right? I was just at that place and then it was time for me to get on a plane again.
Oh, right.
So today I am coming into y'all live from Oakland, California, and Interplace Studios,
Mhm.
ancestral land of the Ohlone. And giving you the heads up because I may have to go on mute sometimes because we are at 23rd and Telegraph, which Telegraph is a pretty busy street in Oakland. So I was even noticing in our like there was an ambulance. So I was
Mhm.
like, oh,
Mhm.
mute,
That'll do it.
mute.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
to give you the heads up, if you're listening live today, if I pop out for a second, that's what's going on, protecting listeners' ears. So should
Yeah.
we do our official introduction and get this episode 173 kicked off?
Let's do it. Hey, y'all, I'm Shannon Mitchell, a Black millennial entrepreneur and Amazon best-selling publisher, author, and all-natural product manufacturer. I'm a champion for your natural self-care, sustainable business care, and overall intentional wellness.
Hey, y'all, I'm Christine Gautreaux, a white social justice advocate, an international speaker, embodied coach, Amazon bestselling author and publisher, and a dancing social worker who helps you upgrade yourself and community care.
Together, we are a podcast rooted in the 8 dimensions of wellness and the co-founders of Women Connected in Wisdom Community.
And we like to get together every week with expert guests to talk about how to be wise in business and relationships and wellness. Like, how do we do it all, right? How do we
So
do it?
So important. I'm so excited to have this conversation about social wellness today in the middle of the election. I'm laughing at these ads, at the conversations, and something that we pay attention to when we watch movies and stuff, Pharaoh and I, is the way that movies treat authority, right? And
Say
women
more.
women don't usually get a lot of lines, right? It's usually
Mm,
foolishness. If you watch Batman and stuff, the cartoons, it's foolishness. Like, why does the mayor's daughter have to get shot in the stomach? She can get shot. Does it have to be in the stomach? Like, just the way that we see women portrayed. We talk about it for Black men. If they're in a position of authority, usually it's not for long. Usually they're diverting it to somebody else. So what I've been realizing with the election is that now all of a sudden everything that was done in the last 4 years is Kamala's responsibility. I've never seen so much credit given to a vice president before until this is the way
right.
we have the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I'm noticing the demand of what she should be doing, like with
Mhm.
this latest natural disaster, which,
Mm.
our hearts and our everything go out to
Yes.
our friends in North Carolina.
Yes.
We broadcast live to y'all usually from Atlanta, Georgia. So
Right.
North Carolina is our neighbor and our friend. And,
Yes.
if you've listened to the podcast long, you've heard me mention Asheville. We have some of our women connected in wisdom. We have Melody LeBaron and Cynthia Phelps, and we have
Yes.
a lot of folks we love in that area that are currently impacted. And just, ah, you know, I had a friend yesterday
Yeah.
finally check in. Like
Mm.
I was holding for 4 days.
Yeah.
Like, are they okay? Like
Right.
I didn't even realize how stressed out I was until I heard a text came from another friend because their texts weren't getting out because all the
Right.
cell towers are down,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So all of us had been trying to reach them, and finally one text came to one person
Good.
with the thing that said, "Hey, please forward to everybody because I
Yeah.
don't know what texts are coming." And
Mm.
all of us felt our shoulders go from like our up here to just down
Yeah.
because yeah, it is I don't know why I went off on that left turn. I don't know what we were
We're
talking
right here.
about,
That's
but I was
completely
thinking
relevant.
about connections, and
Yeah.
because of the what they're asking of Kamala for
Yes.
federal aid and things like
Mhm.
that, and all the misinformation because they're
Mhm.
saying, "Oh, they haven't." Oh, yes, they have. Like
Right.
FEMA is on the ground and giving things, and I think the delay in that area, especially from just witnessing it and having a lot of people there that I love,
Mhm.
is that literally it was such a disaster that they could not get the news out about how big of a disaster it is because
Mhm.
all of the cell towers were down, all the roads were down. You couldn't get in or out for
Mhm.
24 to 48 hours, and
Wow.
yeah, I mean, and Georgia was hit, Florida was hit, South
Mhm.
Carolina was hit, North
Yes.
Carolina was hit. But really, and I also just want to acknowledge if folks are listening, like
Yes.
paying attention to our bodies during this time, because
Mhm.
I noticed this last week in my own body, like stored memories and trauma from Katrina and
Mhm.
Rita and hurricanes I've been through or had
Mhm.
loved ones go through. And
Mhm.
I just think about this right now, like the times we live in.
Yes.
It's even a double challenge to be well.
Really? And, and here, so we were watching the weather all week, right?
Mhm.
Because we had the Sweet Auburn Fest. We're like, what's gonna happen? People coming from around the country for this. And then we finished the storm, right? We finished the event, and then there's a chemical fire. And I'm
Oh,
like,
that right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
So
the
we all
chemical
got
fire is
y'all
a
in
chlorine.
Atlanta. If you aren't local to Atlanta, I don't know if it made national news with everything else going on, but we
Right,
had just come through. We dodged the tropical storm. It came through, but we did pretty well in the
right.
Atlanta area.
Mhm.
And then we have this chemical fire, which they're telling everybody to shelter in place, and then they're telling people, thousands of people, to evacuate.
Yeah.
And then, like, it's
But
so
this was the thing, y'all, and this is why we do Women Connected in Wisdom, right? Because
hot.
it wasn't just everybody, it was one county. But as a notary, right, I know that there's 159 counties. So I said, if they're only telling one county, what about everybody else who's under the wind or the possible rain or if it
Yep.
moves, right? So even though I'm not in that county, I knew I was close. My other business
Mhm.
partner, his whole backyard was full of this smoke.
Mm,
And of course, being intentional about my physical wellness with the shea butter and everything else, I'm like, nope, I need water, Shea Low Glow. Everybody who bought Shea Low Glow, I'm posting on social media, cover your skin for your immune
mhm,
system, right? It's
mm,
imperative. And like you said, just checking in with where we are. Because
mhm.
it's easy to get moved when you have really big things going on. But then where does that mean you live during that season? So super excited to talk about how to be intentional about our social wellness for ourselves, for the community, because we have people who
Right,
love us, who wanna, check in, but what does that look like? How do we do that in
right,
different seasons?
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, how about I read the, definition of
Yeah.
what we're working with and playing with today, and then we'll get our guest up here.
Let's do it.
So, social wellness is what we're talking about today, y'all. And according to Women Connected in Wisdom in our definition, social wellness is about the ability to nurture ourselves, others, and our relationships with healthy boundaries. It includes balancing the other seven dimensions of wellness and actively participating as an interdependent being in the web of life.
So important. I'm thinking
Right.
about the ability to nurture ourselves, right? I just saw this beautiful video of this woman who cooks, gives meals every day to the community, and she needed help financially. The person who was narrating this video asked her, right? We saw the video and she kind of hesitated when she said she was okay, and this person was like, "I don't think she's okay." And the city ended up buying her a car. Right now,
Mm,
beautiful, beautiful contribution from the city. Now, I, as somebody who's paid for a brand new car, it took me 7 years to pay off this car, y'all. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So when we look at the investment that she gave and the time that she's been doing it, maybe that did maybe even wash it even for how much money that she's been giving for these plates, right? But I think about as women how much is asked of us and how we're conditioned to give and take care of our community. And for me, my hope for us around the world, and we'll talk about it with our guests, is for us to be able to also take care of ourselves and be philanthropic and take care of those around us, you know? I think about the illustration of giving away my bricks. It's not healthy to give away the bricks to my house to help somebody else build, and then I look and I'm not taken care of, you know? What do you think about that, or what comes up for you with this definition this week?
Yeah, what comes up for me is in times of crisis.
Mhm.
I I know I do get moved sometimes.
Of
Like
course.
I can't tell you how many hours I spent this week scouring socials and sites trying to find my friend.
Yeah,
And
of course.
the power of connection, the power of and I mean, I think what it comes out to me is that balancing. We always put
Mhm.
it in quotes,
Yeah,
right?
we
Because
do.
we like to quote Stacey Abrams, and
Mhm.
when she says in her book, it's not a work-life balance, it's a work-life Jenga,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so I think about that Jenga, and I
Mhm.
think about sometimes I have to pull hard on this one, and sometimes I don't, right?
Mhm.
Um, I was thinking about that because I had a dear friend pop into the office here, and she's like, "You didn't call me back." And I was like, "When?"
Right.
And she's like that, and I said, "Oh,
Oh, really? Yeah.
know that you can always give me a gentle nudge,
Mhm.
to say, 'Hey,' or even better, tell
Yeah.
me what you want in your text.
Mhm.
Because if I'm in the middle of an emergency or I'm running and doing something,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, 'Oh, we're just calling to chat,' that
Right.
may get reprioritized
True.
versus you tell me I have a deadline or this is happening."
Right.
Um,
Can we go a little bit more into that, and then we can bring our guest up,
yeah.
because we talk a lot about that with Women Connected in Wisdom, social wellness. Coach Cole talks about friendships, and so we've talked about what do you do in friendships or relationships when you're in a crisis or this person is in a crisis, and how to give grace, have realistic expectations, but also be mindful of their capacity and where they are. So when you say check in, you can always give me a gentle nudge. What does that look like for
Right?
you?
Well,
For you?
literally for me, for my
Mhm.
friends,
Yeah.
it's send me an emoji. Like if
Mm,
I missed if my last text was to you that I was going to call you
yeah,
and you haven't heard from me,
yeah.
send me a heart emoji, cuz then
Mhm,
what that's going to do is it's going to pop your text to the
mhm.
top of my text. And I was having this conversation the other day cuz we're all different, right? We
Yeah.
all run at different speeds.
Mhm.
And one of my friends is one of our Women Connected Wisdom is actually
Yeah.
traveling with me this week. And
Yeah.
she said, Christine, you run at a different speed.
Mhm.
And it's intimidating. She goes, like, people don't, unless they run with you, she said, they don't. I've watched you, like the
Mhm.
amount of emails you get, the amount of text you get, the amount of, and so sometimes it's just a matter of where were you in that 50 texts that
Mhm.
right?
Of course.
So
Really? Yep.
give me that, "Hey," because I never wanna drop folks. But the
Yeah,
other thing folks that have been listening for a while know, like, this season has been a tough season for me.
of
And
course.
so the other thing that I was telling my friend, I was telling Shrinka, she's one of our Women Connecting Wisdom, she was on season 1.
Yeah.
Um, I was like, "Girl, like, I'm still not functioning at 100%.
Right.
Like, I think I am, but
Mhm.
then grief, like, has a weird time-space continuum for me. So,
Yeah.
like, if you're not in my calendar, forget about it. And it
Right.
doesn't mean I don't love you, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean but my brain's just not working that way right now. It's
Yeah.
starting to come back online about 4 months out, which
Yeah.
is that's the other whole thing interesting to watch with all this
Of
is
course.
we all have different grief meters, but
Yeah.
where do we really fully come back, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's what I was gonna say. We like to operate off of clear definitions. What is
Mhm.
100%? Sometimes
Right?
you're in grief, that is your new 100. You're not going
You're
back, you're not that person anymore, so the old
right.
100 and the new 100 look different. And that's what I'm super excited to talk about with our guest and how she works with different clients. And today, y'all, we're talking about every woman is worthy, the social empowerment of women. And it does look different, like you were saying, Christine, for people in different seasons, for different women in general. So just knowing what works for your community and having those really clear conversations is what's made it easy for me.
Well, and what works for you at that moment, like checking
Exactly.
in with yourself. I can't remember if it was our coffee and chat or our guests were about to bring up
Okay, I
that
could
we
probably
were
help.
talking about vulnerability, right?
Mhm.
So, like, then
I
Shrink and
think
I
it was
had
our
really
coffee and chat.
we had a really heart to heart about it because usually I wouldn't tell her like, "Hey girl, I'm not functioning." But I'm like, "You're my friend and you need to know." Like,
Yeah,
and it may look like in some ways that I'm on it.
right, I'm not. I'm not back.
And then there's this other part of me that's
Mhm.
like, we're still
Right,
over here, right?
right,
And
absolutely.
I think that part of authenticity and
Mm,
also just, we have to pick and choose sometimes who we share that with or who we don't. And
very
but
important.
also just being real with ourselves,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because old me wouldn't have even admitted that. It had,
Mhm.
but so I think that's part of my wellness journey
Yeah.
is really acknowledging, okay,
Mhm.
this is where I'm at and
Mhm.
doing the very best I can.
I'm super
And
happy that you're there now and that you
yeah,
can say that through this season and that it's not
yeah,
after this that you got there.
right, right.
Yeah,
I am really excited to talk to our guest today. You want to read her
me too.
bio and bring her up here?
Absolutely. Okay, y'all. So today we're talking to Maggie Winzeler, and Maggie Winzeler is a women's wellness advocate, coach, and business owner. She has been featured in Shape, NBC News, Thrive Global, and more. In March 2023, Maggie launched a social impact startup called Every Woman is Worthy to remind women of their value and give back to women in need. Welcome to the stage, Maggie.
Thank you guys. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes, super
Welcome,
excited.
Maggie.
Hello.
Yeah, so we're talking about social wellness, Maggie. When you think about every woman is worthy, we can definitely talk, I think, more than this hour as women connected in wisdom, right? But can you tell our listeners and viewers what comes to mind for you and what you're passionate about helping your clients with?
Yeah, so Every Woman is Worthy is a social impact startup that focuses on celebrating women, declaring women's value, reminding them that they matter and that they don't have to be perfect, helping people to really align inherent worth with, because we all have inherent worth, but it doesn't always align with our feelings of self worth. So we celebrate women and try to help with the different narratives that women are facing regarding unworthiness and unworthy narratives, because they're
Yes,
baked into society, they're baked into the way that we are raised and the things that are said to us, they're baked into overt violence and microaggressions alike. So the women in the community are really incredible. We are about a little over 38,000 strong
mm,
in Instagram. It's really grown a ton in the last few months.
congratulations.
I think people are really seeing hope in what we do and saying, you know what, maybe we can lean into something, lean into a message, lean into the deeper layers of who we are and what we deserve and unite over that and come together to celebrate that and lean into the strength of what that has to offer rather than giving up in despair or feeling that the fundamentalist movements that are setting off like wildfires, one followed by the next and then the next and the next all over the world, harming women's rights, stripping them of safety, increasing violence against women. We have examples in so many different countries and
Right,
regions. You know, Afghanistan right now, Iran. Women are protesting in South Korea because they're sick of the violence. Women last spring were protesting in Australia. You've got serious situations happening everywhere from Gaza to Sudan to Haiti. It is prolific. It's gotten way worse since the pandemic.
Mhm.
So our goal is to, on the social media aspect, is to keep things not too in depth, but kind of a digestible information that
yes,
maybe just as a quick, simple reminder. It might not look as in depth as some other accounts, but what it does is it gives people that little bit of validation that they need,
absolutely.
because what we've seen is that so many different like more feminist platforms, I would say we are a more feminist platform advocating for women and their rights and celebrating
Yes,
them and wanting them to be safe and respected. But what we've seen is that it's really important to spread awareness about violence, but there's a lot of that happening right now. And sometimes people, kind of to your point, Christine, sometimes you're not operating at 100% because of grief.
Yes.
And social media keeps going, the news keeps going. And sometimes it is okay to set a boundary about what type of content you have the capacity to consume at that moment, because all of this content out there is very, traumatizing, re-traumatizing. When you
Right.
see something that you relate to, or it throws you off guard. So Every Woman is Worthy seeks to be a bit of a safe haven where we are hyper aware more than most people about the aggressions and the harms against women, and we do talk about them, but we try not to make it the main thing, because we
Right.
have polled people and we have interviewed women, and they're like maybe a third like feels empowered about doing something from awareness and seeing data about the violence against women and seeing specific examples. But the other
Right.
2/3 that we've polled feel helpless. They feel like the world's falling
Yes.
On
apart,
fire.
like there's
Yes.
like there's
Right.
nothing they can do. And
Mhm.
these situations are real, and they're happening to women socially, collectively, as a whole.
Mhm.
But we're 50% of the world's population, folks, and we absolutely can recognize how, on a collective level, our health is connected, our wellness is connected, our rights are connected. And so
Yeah.
really taking care of ourselves first, and then also recognizing how in doing that, we are in fact advocating for other women, even women overseas,
Yeah.
and helping people kind of draw the line between those dots and have that aha moment sort of internally, to realize that they deserve better, realize how they deserve to be treated based on having inherent worth and aligning their feelings and their values and how they move about relationships and communities, getting those things into alignment, and then that being sort of an impetus for change.
I
So
Beautiful.
that's
love
a
that,
lot more.
Maggie. We have listeners from all over the world. We have
Yeah, we do.
listeners from South Korea. We have, yeah. So I'm so glad that you're talking about this,
Yeah.
and that people can get connected and not feel alone. Like, right now in the United States with the election coming up, the misogyny is at its height right
Oh,
now.
oh yeah.
And it can be, almost everybody I've talked to really recently is having a very physical
Mhm.
body
Mhm.
response
Yeah.
Mm.
of anxiety and dread,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
And
Yes.
so being connected to resources, being connected to content
Mhm.
that helps us to manage that. And I mean, even you just saying, hey, y'all, we're 50% of the population.
Mhm.
When
Yeah.
you think about what that means, because we're more than 50%, aren't we? Are we 52, or do you know where we are on that right now?
I don't know the exact specifics. Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
I don't think it's 52, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Okay. We'll have to look
Maybe
that up.
51.4 is coming to mind.
It might be.
Oh,
Random.
Right,
I don't
right.
know. Fact
We
check me.
right, we love specific numbers,
I don't
specific
know. It just came over
definitions. It's
me.
okay. It's
we don't
okay.
have moderators today fact
No, we don't.
checking. We're
Okay, it's
gonna
okay.
Yeah. Speaking of the debate last night, we don't have the
Right.
fact checkers helping us tonight.
Right. And I hear you, Maggie, and we talk about it here too, right? With Christine being a social justice advocate and all of her work, with me, again, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, being a Black woman and the way I see things through a lens of psychology with my background and my degree. It's important, right, to hold the spectrum and to know where we are in reality and know that all these things are going on. Um, and again, if we're mindful of our diet, just like physical wellness, but talking about on the emotional and the spiritual wellness, what do I have the capacity for to intake? And if your platform is for hope and to remind women of their worthiness, then you are right on track for your business plan talking about that, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to talk more about that. You said something that sparked uh, an idea for me, inherent worth. Can you talk more about what you've seen with your clients and why you felt like it was so important to remind women of their worth no matter where they're from?
Yeah. So my background before I started Every Woman is Worthy, I did work with a lot of startups over the last 10 years. So I have been in the startup space for a while, but they've all been fitness and wellness oriented startups. And before that, I was working with coaching. I was doing coaching and working with people for fitness and wellness and runners and a lot of different fitness goals. And what I have seen through the years is that people from, I worked with a very international clientele and people from all over the world in Washington, D.C., where I was doing the coaching for a number of years. Yes. They all were struggling with some layer of self-worth underneath of their exterior, fitness goals. And for me as a coach, sure, if somebody wants 6-pack abs, go for it, but like for me as a coach, like my prerogative is helping somebody feel pain-free, healthy, internally well, and really deconstructing where those goals are coming from. Is your goal coming from something based on society's expectations and pressures, or is it coming from somewhere intrinsic to you?
Right.
And really reminding people that they don't have to put so much pressure on themselves and that they're whole and don't have to be a perfectionist to achieve something, to become more whole. It's great if you achieve those goals. Sure, I want to help you get, to the Boston Marathon, or I want to help you get ready for your wedding and feel your best. That's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with those goals, but you're already whole. And sometimes, a lot of the times, frankly, even with the best coaches, people don't reach their fitness goals. Very few people reach their fitness goals because life gets in the way. They lose motivation. It's harder to stick to. They get sick, work obligations, kids, you name it. And it's very hard for a lot of people to reach what they initially set out to. So I was managing a lot of emotions, for helping people manage their emotions and expectations around what success looks like, and making sure that you always come back to your inherent worth, who you are internally, and sort of that soul level truth that you don't have to do anything or prove anything or be anything to still matter and still be valid and to still, to be
worthy. Right.
Yeah, to be worthy and enough.
I love
that's
that,
how it
Maggie.
all started.
When you talk about that, it makes me think like when you say very few people reach their fitness goals, like it's been years since I've been competing in triathlons, but there was a period in my life where I was doing triathlons, and I was doing sprint triathlons, and then I was doing Olympic triathlons, and somebody says, okay, are you going to go? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm working. I'm a mom of 2. And I totally, not to diss like Ironmen and Iron Women and things like that, but the level of what you have to put into that can be unrealistic when you are caring for other people in your life.
Oh, 100%. I'm not in the shape right now with 3 young kids and a startup business that I used to.
Like,
and that's okay. And I take the pressure off of myself, and I'm okay with it. I'm still healthy, and there's many other seasons in life, which is an important thing to remember too.
Right?
You can also sit with yourself and just say, not in this season, not right now. Can still take care of
I'm going to circle back around to that. One of my goals is to circle back to around as an octogenarian, because I had friends that did the Senior Olympics, and because they outlived everybody else, they were like, I was like, well, that's a worthy goal. Like,
I believe in you, Christine. You can do it.
I'll circle back around. Like,
even if you do it sooner rather than later, I think you'll still blow it out the water.
Seriously. And that's actually something that we talk about in the community quite often, is we talk about ageism and the fact that people have these preconceived notions that our bodies are not going to be as well, when we're older, and that we can't participate in certain things. And that doesn't have to be, we can just drop the negative expectations or the limiting belief systems around age. We don't have to give into that. I think that holds a lot of people back, and it's really lovely to see through social media, especially, a lot of older women who are in their 50s and 60s and beyond, like really showcasing what health and joy and movement and participation and exercise can look like for older women. And I love that. I love including that type of content because that's an example of a limiting belief system that gets imposed on entire cohorts, entire generations. And we in Every Woman is Worthy are constantly looking for simple, digestible ways to deconstruct from those limiting belief systems that hold women back because, feeling the pressure of that and having to conform to whatever the limiting belief system is impacts women in incredibly diverse ways, but very challenging ways.
I love that. Maggie, we got to connect you with our friend and one of my co-authors, Sheila K. Collins, because she's in her 80s and she can outdance all three of us on the screen and probably outwork us too. I hang around with really amazing older women. And so I haven't, I know the sky is the limit on that, especially when you keep moving and dancing. But
So true.
I want to ask you, Maggie, like when you work with your clients or in your community, when somebody's struggling with worth, and we know that happens because I mean, shoot, media, like the world, family members, like all kinds of that content can come into us that can make us challenge ourselves. When somebody is struggling with worth, where is like the first place you would recommend they start or a resource for them to say, what can I do about this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to stand up for 1 second because my dog is threatening to interrupt us by scratching at the door. So I'm going to leave my husband's gamer chair, which you'll see here.
I love it. I love it. And so relatable.
Yeah, it's like, of course, get the husband to take care of all 3 kids. They're out. The food's in the oven, but then the dog is scratching at the door.
That is real life. Very relatable.
High maintenance little animal down here. So resources for where women should look for worth, or to align with their worth. There's so many. And I think so much of it would depend on asking yourself some questions first before deciding which resources are most relevant. So I would start with sitting down and really getting real with yourself and journaling and asking yourself some challenging questions and being honest, saying, where are my unworthy narratives coming from? And I bet any woman could sit down and write down at least 3, right?
Right.
And then taking it into layers deeper than that. Once you identify those, your kind of high level, what are your unworthy narratives? Next level, why are those your unworthy narratives? Where is that pressure coming from? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it because of the way you were raised? Is it because of just sort of the general social pressure to look a certain way or achieve a certain level of wealth or job title or buy a house and have babies by whatever X age society determines makes you the most worthy,
It's a thing.
Yeah, all of those things, right? So and maybe it's more intense than that. Maybe it's something like domestic abuse really stripped you of feeling like you were worthy.
Right.
That is a control tactic in domestic abuse that isn't physical, right? And physical as well, but the psychological, emotional abuse tears down a woman's self-worth. That's what it does. It isolates her and it makes her feel like her validation depends on the approval of her abuser, and that she is not enough unless he says that she is enough. So there's so many places that digesting your unworthy narratives could go in terms of where are those limiting belief systems, oppression, aspects of being marginalized, where are those coming from? Which, by the way, like we have a shop that has products with uplifting messages on it. And we give back currently 100% of the proceeds from the shop to initiatives for marginalized and oppressed women,
Mhm.
because the marginalized and oppressed women are the ones not only being overtly devalued, but feeling the deepest effects of being devalued.
Right.
And look no farther than our Instagram page, where when we flip the narrative on an archetype of a woman or a woman's experience, and we flip it and declare her worth. Oh my gosh, there are a few just in the last couple of months where we will have thousands of comments, and it's very stereotypical, very polarized stuff politically in America. But we were talking once about women's rights being important to upholding LGBTQ plus rights. When we see women's rights in countries fall, like those rights, the LGBTQ plus community rights have no chance.
Yeah,
The safety is
absolutely.
very correlated and connected. So we talked about that. And of course, you can expect what happened you can expect the backlash that happened there. The one that really shocked me recently was about declaring that women who don't have children have worth.
Oh,
And
right. That big narrative.
people went crazy saying that it's selfish, and if a woman doesn't have children, she's not upholding, the society's needs, biologically. And it was just nuts. And so you were talking early on before I hopped on about these ways that we get triggered, and the temperature, the political and social temperature that's happening right now, and how much do we have or not have the capacity to deal with it. And I just think it was so telling of how polarizing things are. And also I was very triggered by that. I have 3 kids, but I've also lost 2. And so this whole concept that just about women and fertility and childbearing being where their worth is, I was so angry. And I've done a lot of work myself through my own grieving process to be okay with certain types of triggering content. So it really surprised me. Because I am a mother, but it wasn't about that. It was my connection to other women. It's knowing friends of mine who don't have kids. They haven't met somebody that they have decided to settle down with, and maybe they never will. One woman who lost her fertility at a very, very young age because she went through a very early menopause. She was adopted. She didn't know her mother's, reproductive history, and it really took her by surprise. I have an aunt who never married or had children. I had an uncle with Down syndrome who never had children, right? Like, I think there's plenty of worthy people out there in the world who don't have children who are helping stand up society. Right. And so any woman without children for whatever reason, choice, childless by choice, childless, not by choice, any of that, I hope you know that you matter deeply.
Right.
Absolutely.
Deeply. And we're all connected, and one woman who's a mother versus another who isn't, there's no hierarchy here. And that's what Every Woman is Worthy believes. There's no hierarchy of worthiness. We are all on the same team, folks. Same team.
Right. Well, and the step parent discussion that's happening in our country right now, that is just nuts too.
What's the discussion?
Because they were saying that Kamala Harris, our current nominee for president, is not a mother. She's a stepmother. Like, and I'm going to say one thing on that, and then I'm going to flip back because I want to say something. But, I find it very interesting that we're even having this conversation, because to me, it's a completely misogynistic, hypocritical conversation, because no other president in the United States has birthed a child. None.
Come on.
Period. So why are we even having this conversation? It just, to me, but I also want to put a note on, I was watching a movie, it was a TV series recently called Dark Winds. And it's about Native Americans in our country and the history of forced sterilization on certain populations in our country. So that's what gets me, like, Maggie, when we start to have this conversation and we're like, "Irk," I'm like, excuse me?
Right.
Like, there is so many layers to the conversation. And when we talk about healthcare and access to healthcare, and a dear friend of mine who lost her ability to have children because she couldn't access healthcare in a timely manner,
Okay.
um, and what's currently happening with our reproductive rights and what that means for women. Like,
Mhm.
it's so multi-layered. And yes, that we're on the same team. And I
Yes.
wish women would, we could realize, like, y'all, we need to be paying attention right now because this is serious
It's very.
about about just so many things right now. It is yeah, I don't want to be an alarmist, but we
Mm.
were talking, I think last week or the week before, Shannon and I were
Last
talking on
week.
the podcast about, I think it was in Iran 20 years ago, um, that women, like, what it looked like 20 years ago in their country versus what it looks like now. And Afghanistan, the same thing.
Mhm.
Like,
People
we
don't
have
think
to be paying attention
we
and
do.
voting.
And
Yeah,
people don't think that that can happen to us. And as
right?
somebody right here with a strong, like, fingers on the pulse of what's happening internationally with women's rights,
Mhm.
the reality of the connected world socially, the reality of the connected world, if we're talking about social wellness, is that it has given the fundamentalists more communication and more enclosed communities and more ways to mobilize.
Mhm.
However, they might be the first to act, but they are not bigger in number. And that's what people need to keep in mind
Mhm.
socially, is that we, as the collective, the silent majority, have so much power, and it's about using it. There's some research out there that shows what percentage of people would it take in a region to affect change and, like, snow, and
Right.
to really, like, start a movement. Like, what percentage would that be? And it's so much smaller. It's
Right.
so much smaller than people realize. It's
Yep.
3%.
Yep.
3%. That's all. And so, okay, if the fundamentalists can do it with 3%, and maybe they have, a little bit more bandwidth than that, in their numbers at large, that are somehow loosely connected, well, then what can the 90% plus do in the world?
Right?
Get involved and start coming together. And that's, again, like, what we're trying
Right.
to do at Every Woman is Worthy is pull people together in a universal message that's relevant to every country. Every woman is worthy of support. Every woman is worthy of respect. Every woman is worthy of safety.
Mhm.
Every woman is worthy of compassionate, non-stigmatizing healthcare. Like, all of these
Mhm.
things, it's about, inherent worth and how that extends out and connects to human rights. And yeah, if you want to
Mm.
look into the future of what America could be, look to look
Pay
to places
attention, y'all.
look to places in the Middle East. Those countries are much older than us. They are
Right.
not younger and backwards and less evolved. They have been
Right.
around much longer. We are a young
Right.
country, and we absolutely have to make sure that we are advocating for the people who need it, and
Yeah.
protecting our
I
freedom.
was I was talking to Sheila this week, Dr. Sheila K. Collins, that we referenced earlier, and she's in Pennsylvania. She's in a swing state, and she has been out knocking on doors. I mean, she's 85, and she's going to do whatever it takes to protect women. And so what she said, though, we had to dance and do a dance on behalf of, and really calm her nervous system down because she said she couldn't tell you how many women that couldn't say who they were voting for because it was dangerous for them to say that right now in 2024. And
Yeah.
that just breaks my heart. And, reminding women that our vote is private, and that we need to research, we need to pay attention. And then when we go in that voting booth, we have the right to vote for who we want to vote for. And nobody has to know who that is. So,
And one quick thing, because I think that this is really relevant to white women and to discussions around white feminism, which is different than white feminists. White feminists can, have the right intentions versus white feminism being about the white experience and about protecting one's own power and rights, and thinking from the individual standpoint instead of from the collective standpoint. And it has been shown that white women are more likely, and I didn't think I was going to get into politics, but here we go. White women are more likely to vote conservative, right? And fine, vote however you want. But right now, we know specifically that women's rights are on the line.
Absolutely.
And what's interesting about the whole white feminism concept is that white women traditionally think that the patriarchy, subconsciously think that the patriarchy and the patriarchal powers are protecting them, when in fact they're not. They're not. It is a false bubble of safety. It is a false bubble of safety. And white women are the ones who buy into that because they have, traditionally more power than people of other races in America specifically. So
I agree with you on that. Absolutely.
It's a false sense of security. And it's a big criticism of white women. And I say this as white women myself, and I see it with women around me,
right.
is a criticism of white women that sort of believing that the system benefits you causes this good girl behavior, this good girl appeasing behavior. I have to fit into this nice girl, appease everybody around me, do good. And that's what makes a lot of white women hang their worthiness on being good, right? And what means being good, and what does that look like, and how does society expect me to be that? And ultimately, that's a really shallow, fragile place for self-worth to be put on. That's like putting it on sand, right? And so ultimately, operating really from a place of insecurity causes white women to be a lot more catty and competitive, and the frenemies thing and scarcity mindsets, and we don't need that, guys.
No.
We don't need that.
No, we don't.
Nobody needs that. Not for their own health, and not for the collective health of all diverse women. So.
Well, thank you for saying that, Maggie, and thank you for saying it so clearly. We often talk here about collaboration over competition. And what we've got to realize in this election specifically, y'all, is how this impacts our health as women. Every layer, we've talked about it on the show before, but folks need to go read Project 2025, and we can put a link to it in our show notes about what they're proposing to take away, and what they are proposing, and they wrote that to put into effect. And so, and I think people think, oh, that's not true, or that's not. We talked about it a couple of months ago on the podcast, because at first when I heard about it, I was like, what? Like, what is happening? And then I went and I was watching the authors testify in Congress about it. And they're like, yeah, we wrote it, and this is what we mean, and this is what they believe. And so I think, to your point, Maggie, about that false, they think it's white women especially think that they're protected by conservatives.
Can we go into it a little bit more, though? Because when I was studying this in undergrad, right, talking about psychology, this is what comes up for me about it. Back in the day, right, when men's salary was set at a certain point because he's supposed to take care of the household, right? Even though as an individual, this might not help this woman. As a household, now as somebody who's not working outside of the house, it does make sense at a certain standpoint to go with what works better for him. If you have a white husband, and then you can benefit, and you are going to benefit, right? But I feel like it's a Venn diagram of how it overlaps. And like you're saying, Maggie, when you find yourself and you're the one in the hospital room, and they're not listening to you because they think women speak nonsense and they're conditioned to hear womp, 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 and people make all these jokes about it. And then you're on the table. What do? You realize how important it is to vote with your interests in mind while still remembering the environment that you live in. That's what I think about. Do you think that that's part of it, or do you think that they see the difference and they're still voting um, in a way that supports the community and not necessarily themselves?
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's really nuanced and complicated, because it's
Yeah.
interesting. There are people in our Every Woman is Worthy community
Mhm.
who are on both sides of the political aisle, and I I think that most of the women who are more conservative do tend to be white, but they also are like strongly for women's rights. So I can't typecast and say they're going to do one thing or another,
Of
because they
course.
do, it's like they do care about women's rights,
Yeah.
just like the liberal women in our community. So it's, I think it all really comes down to like a personal, a
Yeah.
personal thing with where people are seeing. I feel like
The
most
benefit.
people tend to vote with one or two issues in mind
Mhm.
as like
Mhm.
what sways them, right?
Makes
Mhm.
sense.
And I think those of us who care so deeply at this moment about women's rights and who get the bigger picture and who are willing to be vulnerable and recognize that this impacts all women,
Mhm.
all birthing people,
Yep.
period. All people with a uterus or not a uterus who have female hormones,
Right.
period, right? Like
Yep.
it impacts all of us and our health care, and things that women could never fathom.
Right.
Those who think that they are unaffected could never fathom, because hello, I was one of them. I told you all, like, I never expected to. I'm a healthy person. I've worked in fitness, studied kinesiology. I never expected to have a complicated pregnancy. I'd
Right.
seen friends go through them, but I thought that would never be me. How
Right.
could it, right? You don't, just like I was hit by a car when I was in my 20s. You
Yeah.
never think that the unexpected can happen to you, and then it does, and it changes things.
Yeah.
And for me, going through all of those, so it was actually this time 4 years ago that I was receiving all sorts of updates on tests and results and early scans and everything. And every week that you're waiting to see what's going on with your wanted loved baby,
Yes.
and understanding, are they going to make it, what's happening with their health, and feeling things happening in your own body, which I had a strange instinct from day one, really
Okay.
truly. From day one, I felt
Okay.
like my body was doing something really unusual, and I was
Mm.
very uneasy and breathless, and like I had
Okay.
said before, I knew something was wrong. And this isn't a criticism of my child, but I told
No.
my husband, I was like, I feel like I'm possessed by an alien, like my body is doing something. And this was before I knew anything.
Mhm.
I said, my body is just doing something. I can't breathe, I can't take a deep breath. Even blood draws, like my blood wasn't like flowing well.
Mhm.
There was an artery that kept blocking the baby's heartbeat anytime they tried to feel the heartbeat or
Wow.
listen to it. And I had this uneasy feeling, and everybody just kept chalking it up to the fact that it was in the pandemic. The world was crazy at the time. And anyways, but it ended up that my gut instinct was right, and I had a second trimester loss and went in for a DNE to remove the pregnancy, and had a very rare experience, trigger warning, rare
Mhm.
experience where my uterus and uterine artery ruptured.
Wow.
And if that happened now in some states,
Yep.
especially if they take certain drugs off of the medical carts for emergencies, like I might not be alive.
Yeah.
The risk, the maternal mortality rates for that were like 30 to 40% for the type of rupture that I had. And if I hadn't been in a hospital, I would be dead, and I would have been dead in less than 10 minutes.
Wow.
Like, no, I mean, it was major artery. And I
Yeah.
think personally, I think that strange sense that I had was my
Mhm.
body trying to fight for
Yeah.
the pregnancy through something unnatural that was happening.
Mm.
So I don't blame the surgeons or anybody. I just have a deep knowing of it was always going to happen that way.
Yes.
So yeah, so I had an emergency C-section, and had a fallopian tube removed, and they found the artery and cauterized it, and stitched me back up. And so it was very physically traumatizing, but obviously, but what I learned through that recovery, and what I learned through going through a complicated pregnancy, and also then requesting to have my last fallopian tube removed in the C-section, the planned C-section, because I was so high risk that like it was dangerous to go into labor. And so I had planned to have my last fallopian tube removed. And because of the hospital my doctor was at, I had to get an ethics committee to approve it. And they were not going to approve me having my last fallopian tube removed while I was already open on the operating table to prevent being able to get pregnant in the future. They weren't going to approve it because it was best for me and my mental well-being, and it was best for my physical safety, and best based on the statistics of another complicated pregnancy potentially happening, and not wanting to put a child at risk. None of that mattered. None of that mattered at all. None of it mattered, and it won't matter if women's rights aren't restored. Like, decisions like that will not matter. The only reason that they removed it was because I had a family history. One family member, a great grandmother who I never met, had ovarian cancer and died of ovarian cancer. And ovarian cancer often starts in the fallopian tubes, and that's part of why it's so aggressive. And that was like new information to me, that it starts in the fallopian tubes. So yes, that's the only reason they were willing to do it. And that really, like, I remember when I learned about Project 2025 a long time ago, before people were talking about it. I was tuning into all of these conversations and knocking down doors and saying, I wrote a book. We need to have these conversations. Christians need to be willing to have these conversations. Like, I'm a Christian, and like, that's how I was raised. And I was like, we have to have these compassionate conversations around women's reproductive health. Everybody turned me down. Everybody turned me down and said, this seems important, but nobody's going to listen. No publisher is going to be willing to talk about this. And I was like, I was livid. I was so angry. And then I was getting rejected right before everything happened, where there was kind of sort of the whispers of Roe v. Wade potentially getting overthrown. And I was on top of that really early on, and listening to all of that. And I just had this sense of doom. I was like, it's going to get overthrown. And I was right before it did. And I was in agony, and I'm a spiritual person. I was praying. Spiritual wellness is really important to me. And I was praying, and like one of those like angry prayers, where you like throw it into the universe, and you're like, nobody seems like they're listening. I feel like some people are listening now, but at that time I was like, nobody's listening. Right. And this is so important, and it's going to impact everyone, even the people that don't realize it.
Right.
Yes. Beside myself. And I felt so alone in that. And I like threw that prayer into the universe, and in my anger, and I was in my bathroom, and a calm swept over me. I was like, what's the answer? Like, what is it that can get people to have it like make sense to them? What is the message I could say that would ever get somebody to understand why this matters? And that was when Every Woman Has a Heartbeat.
Oh, Maggie.
Thank you for sharing.
Maggie.
That's the first time I've publicly shared about that. Yeah. That was the moment where in my bathroom, in my anger and agony and distress over seeing what was about to happen and the world not reacting. And Every Woman Has a Heartbeat came over me, and I felt from day one like it was a calling. And from day one, every time that I have been at my wit's end, like, I need these resources to be able to get to this next thing. It's like the people I'm not going out. Things are coming to me because I don't know. I don't understand. It's just, I feel like it's just meant to be. And the fact that in a year and a half, with very, very little resources strapping together, bootstrapping and a small, passionate team in the early startup phase, trying not to take on investors yet, in that phase, the fact that we've reached 10 million people, that is exciting. That to me is like,
Maggie.
If we keep say it and say it on repeat, and get people in different countries to say it on repeat, and get the men hearing it on repeat, that phrase alone, to me, it affects all the others. It's like an amplifier. We put it onto something relating to women's lived experiences, and it's an amplifier. And that's what it's here to do. It's here to help raise the volume for all the things, all the causes that women are already out there doing, and help give them a more clear runway, hopefully, for
Oh,
success.
So
I
proud.
love that, Maggie.
So
I
proud
know
of
you
you.
have a hard stop in
Yeah.
just like about a minute.
Yeah, I'm like
So
six
will
minutes, a
you
timer is going to go off for some
will
food.
you tell folks how to connect with you? How to connect with Every Woman is Worthy? How do they
Yeah.
find you?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, everywomanisworthy.com. That's where we have our shop and some more information about our mission and where those proceeds are going. We have more information about the 3 organizations that we donated to with our first year's proceeds. And those organizations all were around the theme of reproductive dignity and safety. One here in Virginia, one nationally, helping with period poverty. The one here in Virginia, Birth in Color, helps Black women and women of color with doula access for safe pregnancies, birthing experiences, and postpartum. And they do a lot of like reproductive justice and advocacy, and they're incredible. And I really hope to see them go national. And then we helped with some services in Gaza for women who were unable to get to hospitals for delivering their babies safely in Gaza. So everywomanisworthy.com is the first resource, and you can learn lots there. We also have our main social media presence is Every Woman is Worthy on Instagram. And that's where the majority of our community is. And I tell you, like, it's incredible seeing the people who come to us and seeing that it really is reaching people from diverse walks of life. And that's the goal, because social media is oftentimes very focused on just one community or one lived experience, right? And we're kind of challenging things here by saying we need to get into a culture and a rhythm of clapping for each other and listening to each other's experiences. So, like, to be honest, like the Latinx and the Asian American content that we put on there, not a ton of engagement yet, but it's like, but we're not just here for the metrics. We're here for change, right? So
We're here for the women.
We're here to keep making sure that they're represented and that they have a place in our content, right? Like, and it's about nurturing that. And every snapshot that we do, like top to bottom of our feed, it's like we pause every once in a while and ask ourselves, like, who are we missing? And that's a big important question that we ask all the time. Like, who is not represented in this that we accidentally missed? Have we, mentioned enough people with disabilities? Like, that's a big goal to like continue to integrate in. Have we talked about women who are neurodivergent? Have we talked about different races and ethnicities? Have we included diverse body sizes? Have we made sure to give a nod to women who are over the age of 50, who get unseen on social media? So it's a big marketing risk, right? It's like breaking every rule of marketing, because you're supposed to pick a niche and stick with it. And I'm like, well, that's not us.
Right.
Us either.
Yeah. And I know
we see you, Maggie. We see you, and we
do.
appreciate you. And you were going to say something, Shannon, before we go?
Yes. And again, Maggie, at any time you need to jump off, cut the answer short, let us know. But you shared really big stories, right? And with October 15th coming up, and what did we say? The Pregnancy Loss Awareness Day, right? You said you were grieving through it, right? And that you had tools that you used. I would love if you give our listeners something that helped you through this process with your 2 children that you don't have the opportunity to hold every day, right? And then the advocacy. I think this is something really important when we talk about self-worth and what to do in these medical situations. How do you handle situations like that?
Yeah. So with regards to what helped me, honestly, I think getting down to my lowest in grief and feeling a sense of shame, because it was a complicated pregnancy. I didn't know what to do, and I never thought that I would sit in those shoes. And everyone around me was very compassionate and said, "There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer." But just going through that as any person is a hard thing, regardless of the outcome. Just having to think through big logistics and big decisions and complications and loss is very difficult. So I think for me, I really got to my lowest, and it was a matter of reminding. It sounds so trite, but like, it really was a matter of like piecing together my self-worth again and reminding myself all the time, every day, about who I truly am when I was trying to look for resources and support around the topic of TFMR and women who had faced those types of decisions, like also like late losses, stillbirths. Like I didn't have a stillbirth, but like just putting a lot of information out there, and trying to be vulnerable with people of diverse experiences and connecting on it, on a really vulnerable level. That helped me a lot, but also, setting a boundary around when I was looking for compassionate spaces and being met with the opposite and feeling more unworthiness, right? Reminding myself again and again, like, these are people who don't know me. These are people who can't understand it. And like, I know my heart. I know my intentions. I knew the different directions I was being pulled in before my loss. And that's my truth to sit with between myself and my husband and God. And nobody can take my experience away from me. And ironically, I felt very held in grace and love by, you can call it God, creation, the universe. It was a very deeply spiritual time for me. And most people would say that would be a time, if I was thinking about ending the pregnancy for medical reasons, like that would be a time that should be the opposite, and it wasn't. I had so many revelations through that, and a near-death experience when I bled out, and I came out of it with, yes, loss and grief and trauma, but also deep, deep, deep peace about how connected we are to each other. So I would encourage anybody who's going through a loss to remember that connection, to remember that if you are grieving somebody who is lost, and a baby in particular in this conversation, if you're grieving that loss, to remember them in a way that feels honoring and safe to you, and form some sort of ritual. Maybe it's on October 15th with the light, the wave of light, and lighting a candle. Or maybe for me, it's every October I visit the graveyard where my son is buried, and I just talk with him, and I pray, and I journal. So I have letters every year that I'm writing to him, and that gives me a lot of peace. But a lot of women go through different rituals, lots of different rituals that you can do. So finding a ritual that brings your experience and your loss honor, I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did I add an extra? I said two. It's been one that you had this experience with.
So I had an early miscarriage.
Okay.
So I've been through 5 pregnancies and had an early miscarriage at a family reunion, go figure.
Wow.
And then I had the late loss, the late loss following a complicated pregnancy.
Maggie, so sorry for your loss. And thank you for being willing to share your pain and how you've turned it into purpose. Like, it is powerful to witness your story.
Thank you.
And you creating Every Woman is Worthy out of this is really, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I hope too that anybody listening remembers that, this isn't coming from me. This is a universal message. It's a universal truth, and it's your birthright. So this isn't my truth to share. It's your truth to own, honestly.
Love it.
So
So we'll start with you. We usually wrap every episode with what we're doing this week. When you think about social wellness, what are you doing for yourself as your wisdom in action?
yeah. So I'm gonna have to run in 2 seconds to make sure my house doesn't burn down from
Please don't.
food in. But say the question last time, and then I'll have to roll off after this.
You bet.
Yes. What's your wisdom in action for social wellness this week?
Okay, this is actually a good one. So I'll try to be very brief. I have been working on boundaries with friendships because I'm a big giver, and I've been talking to my therapist, who I got back with recently, and because I was just noticing some challenges internally around friendships, and it's not something people talk about. To how do you navigate female friendships that change as seasons change, and who do you hold on tight to, and who do you accept, letting go of? And people go through things, so you don't want to just axe somebody out of your life who's a near and dear friend, because
Mhm.
they could be going through a hard season and it's just tough
Yes.
to get in touch with them. So I
Yes.
liked that instead of thinking about it as like a circle of who's in your circle or out of your circle, and it's just one or the other, this black and
Mm,
white thing. I
mhm,
loved I love the way we started talking about it and framing it as more of like a pyramid,
mhm.
right? Like you've got your top, the people who are your near and dear with, a few people at the very top, and your acquaintances and people at the bottom, and how in life people are going to come and change levels in your pyramid, and that's okay. And I think that gives space to like let let relationships be a little different in different seasons of life, and leaving space um, to have them return and be more in depth again. As I say this often. I'm like, I let go with love, because I can't keep
Mm,
over giving. So I'm
mm,
not going to set a hard boundary, right? Because like boundary setting is an important part of honoring your self worth. I'm not going to set a hard boundary and say I'm never going to talk to you again, but I'm going to let go with love. You're still going to be in my pyramid, and I hope that we reestablish a deeper connection in the future.
mm.
And
I love that.
that
Let go
protects,
with love.
yeah, and it protects honestly, that protects my mental wellness too, because I think if I were to say, oh, they're just out of my life, for me personally, unless it was like a really toxic, abusive situation, for me personally, I think that would create some bitterness and like coldness. And
Yeah.
that's not something I want to carry either. Um,
Mm,
Love it.
I hope
mm.
that helps somebody, because I think it's
It does.
friendship is important, and we just don't talk about how to navigate it very often. So,
Maggie, we're going
Thank
to
you,
have you
Maggie.
back to have a further conversation because this
yeah,
was delightful. We know you've
thank
got to
you.
run. Don't burn
Yeah,
down your house. We appreciate you, your wisdom. We will
thank
put
you
your
all.
links on our show notes so
Yes.
people can connect with you. And we're just so
Perfect.
grateful for your work in the world. Thank you, thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
And
you, ladies.
Of
yeah,
course. Talk
we
soon.
appreciate you.
Yes. So important.
So good. Well, what's your wisdom in action this week?
Oh, let me see. I love how she said hashtag let go with love. Let's see. We're talking about social wellness. I think I like where was I? What did I just see? The hashtag take the pressure off.
Mm,
What she was talking about, pressure off. Y'all know I take notes if you're listening. So what
mhm.
she was talking about, the shift of seasons, my
Right,
support system,
right.
as everybody's, right? My support system shifted during COVID, and I thought
Mhm,
people would shift back, but everybody's still stretched, right? Um, and so I've had the opportunity to take pressure off of those around me, like, no, you have absolutely been showing up based on your
mhm,
capacity. Two kids make sense. This makes sense. COVID makes sense.
mhm,
All these things make sense. And then we talk about sustainability of business, with us doing all of this and even starting at Manifestation Monday, how many years ago? 7, 8 at this point,
right.
I started with zero businesses. I was the one that didn't have a business
Mhm,
at the table. So now to be ending the year on 4 businesses, take the pressure off of what you thought a perfect business would look like and the
mhm.
reality that you would be there with all of this being your first time. And I've been having fun just communicating. We talked about human design earlier, and one of the things for manifestors is informing, right? So you guys, my community has been great with staying in communication and trying to step together as best as possible and taking the pressure off of each other because of our capacity right now.
Mhm. I
What about
love
for
it.
you?
My wisdom in action this week around social wellness is probably
Yeah.
just hashtag connect. I'm out here in Oakland and I'm wanting to connect with my local inner players. I'm at Inner Place. I've gotten to see a couple of folks that I usually only get to see online. So
Hmm,
mine this week is about connecting
I love it.
and interplaying together. So I think that's, yeah.
I love
Well,
that.
friend, we are
We
over.
are.
So,
And
what else
and
do you want to
sometimes
give
we
a
do
shout
it.
out, right?
I wanna wrap it up with the message to the listeners, and a message to the viewers, because this is one of my things that I'm super excited about, women connected in wisdom. when she was talking about the helplessness and how women from
Mhm.
around the world, no matter their age, no matter their culture, sometimes struggle with their worth. It reminds me of how
Mhm.
we talk to the authors. And no matter which generation, which decade it is, the women are like, well, how does my story fit? And for me, it reminds me of middle school. And they would give out these questionnaires at the beginning of the semester, right? The beginning of the year. And they would say, do you feel like you can have a positive impact on the world? And I said, well, yes, I as an individual can, right? But I feel like I would do more with more people. And so now for us to have 2 books, 173 episodes, connecting women around the world, this is what I was talking about. And that's what gives me hope with what Maggie is doing, that she as a person had these experiences, her and her husband and her family had these experiences, and she's taken the opportunity to connect women around the world to resources that'll help them in those areas. And that's how we do it. And I
Right.
want to let everybody who's listening or watching know that you are automatically priceless, right? We talked about reproductive rights and worth. And what frustrates me about women is that our worth is always based on what we do for somebody else. Even our
Mhm.
bodies, it's only if somebody else touches it,
Oftentimes.
if it's
Yeah.
for somebody else. And that's the story I would love to re organize for us, so that we can come
Mhm.
from a place of wholeness.
Mhm.
We can come from a place of being well, and just going on our journey at the pace that our life is supposed to go on. We talked about you going at a fast pace. Other people are going to go at a different pace. And it's not that they should always match, it's that both and all of them are needed. So please know that
Right.
you're needed, you are worthy. And I hope that you found this encouraging, and that you can get connected to Maggie if you need her. You get connected to our Women Connected in Wisdom if you need us, if you need them, and know that you have the resources and support as best as possible in any season that you find yourself in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We got to wrap.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Anything else that you wanted to say before we get out of here?
No, I gotta go. I think my Instacart guy's trying to get me right now.
Okay, guys.
Yeah. All
Thank you so
right.
much for being here, y'all. In the meantime, we'll be back live at 5 next week. In the meantime, be well, be wise, be whole. Peace.